Hi, everybody. I'm going to allow the attendees to populate a little bit before we get things going this evening. So I'm just going to give us a few seconds here. I see people loading in at this time. All right. I am going to go ahead and open and call to order this meeting of the Community Advisory Council for Iolero for December 6th, 2021 at 6 p.m. I would like to first ask our Vice Chair, Ms. Barrera, if you would please lead us in a roll call for today's meeting.
Of course. Thank you. Councilmember Bailey. Councilmember Estrada.
Present.
Councilmember Flores. Councilmember Pearl.
Present.
Councilmember Pemberton.
Present.
Councilmember Solomon.
Present.
Councilmember Woods. I'm Vice Chair Barrera and Chair Zelig.
Present. We are missing a few people, and I do know Ms. Bailey may be joining us late. For Councilmember Bailey, she may be joining us late. And to the others, hopefully they can offer any comments they have, certainly in other ways. I would like to welcome Nancy Pemberton. Nancy is our newly and recently appointed council member out of District 2. I'm sorry, District 5. Yep, District 5. Sorry about that, Nancy. She is our second representative out of District 5. Max Pearl is our other. Thank you very much for joining us today, and welcome, Nancy.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here.
Great.
Looking forward to working with you all.
Thank you so much. I would like to ask if there is any change or anybody has any comment regarding changes to tonight's agenda. Okay, I see none. At this time, I'm going to also open up for public comment, specifically regarding the approval of our minutes from November 1st. So if there are any members of our public who wish to be heard regarding anything contained in the minutes of November 1st, I will open up for that purpose at this time before we move forward with approval of those minutes. Anybody wish to give public comment in this regard? Okay, I see no hands raised. Are there any members of our CAC who wish to offer any public comment on the minutes of November 1st? Okay, I see no CAC members with their hands raised. In that case, is there a motion from one of our council members to approve the minutes of the November 1st, 2021 CAC meeting?
So moved.
And Mr. Pearl has made that a motion. Is there a second of that?
Yeah.
Second.
Councilmember Barrera? Okay, and Melanie, will you please do a vote or a roll call for approval of the minutes?
Okay. I've got Councilmember Bailey as absent. Councilmember Barrera,
Abstain.
right? Councilmember Estrada, you said same? Abstain? Okay. Councilmember Flores,
So sorry, Melanie, I messed you up. My old last name was Barrera and I just responded to it.
Oh.
I'm so sorry.
well, you were next on the list and I heard abstain.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So sorry.
Councilmember Flores,
Yes.
is that an aye?
Hi.
Aye. Aye. Councilmember Solomon,
Aye.
A, and Councilmember Zelig.
Aye.
Okay.
And Councilmember Barrera, I don't know if we got yours. The abstain was from Councilmember Estrada. I don't know if we heard Councilmember Barrera's.
I got her.
Okay, great. Thank you. So it does appear that the minutes from November 1st are approved. We are now going to move on to item number 2. Item number 2 on our agenda is the discussion of the Iolero annual report. Now, I will note that the IOLERO director, Director Navarro, did complete her report. She has provided that report, and it has been provided to all of us. What I am hoping is that we can open this up for a discussion among the CAC regarding the report and anything of interest that any of our council members saw in the report or wish to discuss. We will then open it up for public comment. I will note that we have not received any response to the report or any other information from the sheriff's office, and I'm not sure if we are going to. After our discussions, I'll inquire with Lieutenant Cutting if we are expecting some type of response from the sheriff's office regarding the annual report this year. So with that, I'd like to open up just our general discussions for the CAC for anybody who wishes to offer comment or open our discussion about the contents of this latest director's report from the IOLERO director. Is there anybody who wishes to offer any comment or begin our discussions today? Councilmember Pemberton, I see you are off mute.
I just thank you for the thoroughness of the report to the staff who wrote it. And I must say that I was concerned about the number of disagreements or incompletes in the audits. I think that it speaks to the need for IOLERO and the need for this council. It concerns me that there were certain cases in which policies were not addressed. And so that IOLERO found violations of policies that Internal Affairs did not even address at all. And I think that it points out that all of these policies are only as good as the enforcement of those policies. And I would urge Internal Affairs and the Sheriff's Department to do a more thorough job of implementing the policies that are already on the books. I think we have a responsibility to address that issue as well as new policies. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Are there any other council members who just wish to offer comment or, of course, follow up on Councilmember Pemberton's comments? Yes, Councilmember Barrera, Lorena Barrera.
I think it was a very thorough report. I like how there's information about current bills and things that are signed into law. I agree with Councilmember Pemberton, and I think this has been brought up by Director Navarro previously, that there's like a backlog and she doesn't have enough staff. And I think the supervisors should continue to keep that in mind and maybe probably take some action on getting more staff to make sure that things get completed and that the community can get, a proper analysis of the complaints that are filed and everything that IOLERO is supposed to audit, because that's, the reason that the department was created. So yeah, it's a lot of audits, and it shows that there's a lot going on. And I think it's pretty detailed in what's included. That's
Councilmember
my
Sul-
overall summary.
Thank you. Councilmember Solomon.
Yeah, I wanted to just kind of echo what Nancy said as well about, it was obviously concerning the level of, or the number of incompletes was also like something that kind of jumped out to me. I'm particularly interested in sustained complaint number 3, which deals with a deputy's social media comments that were focused on Jews and African Americans, and that's something that I think we'll take up in our ad hoc separately. But that's certainly of a concern to me. I also read an article in the PD this last week that outlined it was a very interesting line in there about internal affairs investigations. And I would love to get Lieutenant Cutting's like take on this, but basically it said that whenever there's evidence collected, the standard applied to it is a majority of the evidence going in a certain direction. And that's as opposed to like say preponderance or beyond a reasonable doubt, like that's the legal standard applied to it for investigative purposes. And I'm super curious to hear about the evidence collection process and more details. And that again kind of circles back to Nancy's point about audits are great and investigations are great, but we need to make sure those are being done properly and thoroughly, and that's it. So thanks.
Thank you. Lieutenant Cutting, do you have any information about the internal affairs investigations, and if they are restricted to the evidence that is already available in the case, or if there is a further collection of evidence, a further discovery period, if you will, where additional evidence is collected specifically for the IA investigation, or do they just rely on what's already available?
I guess the question would be deeper into what the complaint is. Every case is different. The complaints don't necessarily come in with evidence, and the complaint comes in as an allegation, and then we investigate based on the evidence. And so we collect the evidence. I supervise the IA unit, so I'm very familiar with the process. I would say that we collect all relevant evidence to that case and use that. I think that's the answer to your question.
Do you also, as part of that investigative process, reach out to the person making the complaint to ask them for any evidence on their end of things? Or are you only collecting it for what investigation you deem necessary?
It would completely depend on the investigation. Typically, well, in every case, we reach out to the complainant or the reporting person, whoever that was. The depth that we get into with them is totally dependent on the claim or the concern. It just depends on what they're saying. And there'd be a million different types of examples out there, but yeah, usually there's an interview with that person, a very in-depth interview with that person, if they're willing.
Thank you. Anybody else who wishes to comment? Councilmember Barrera regarding this.
Follow-up question to what Lieutenant Cutting just said. Is that for complaints that are filed through IOLERO and through the Sheriff's Department, or only through the Sheriff's Department? Just wondering.
Yeah, it's for both. So every time that a complaint comes in directly to the Sheriff's Office, that's where it begins. So that first interview is usually with the complainant. When they come in through the IOLERO office, we do reach out to them as well. We initiate it with a letter that we've received it. I believe IOLERO does the same. And then we'll conduct that interview with that person if they're willing to be named. I mean, we do receive anonymous complaints as well. And obviously that element is not available on those.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do any other council members? Yes, Councilmember Pemberton.
I'm sorry. So Lieutenant, how is it determined? Who determines how much investigation is necessary? I mean, you said that you supervise the Internal Affairs Department, but does each Internal Affairs officer make their own decision? How is that decided?
Yeah, yes. I mean, initially on the investigation, however, if when the investigation comes through, if it's deemed not to be complete, then it goes back to the investigator to do more. It just depends on the case specific. Usually we take everything that's pertinent, and complaints against deputies, you would typically use body worn cameras, any square fixed footage that may be in existence somewhere, whether it be in the jail or in the street level. It just depends. But almost all the complaints that we receive, a body worn camera is applicable to those. So that's a pretty specific thing, and we have direct access to that.
And who decides which policies to address should be addressed? And the reason I'm asking that is because there were at least a few instances where IOLERO said, the Internal Affairs did not consider this policy, and had they considered that policy, they would have found a violation. So how is it decided what policies are considered?
So from the sheriff's office perspective, when we look at a case, we look at what is the primary, the investigation is completed. And once it's completed, then the applicable policies get applied for whether it's, with the findings of it, and those get applied at that point. And yes, there are oftentimes in any investigation where there could be other things that could be looked at. It just depends on what those are. I mean, you can go down a lot of directions in a lot of cases. We focus on what's the specific complaint, and if there is some egregious behavior that came aside from the primary complaint, we would look into those.
Thank you. Do we have any other council members who wish to comment on the annual report or ask any questions regarding that report? Commissioner Sullivan or Councilmember Sullivan?
I wanted to make sure anyone else, I keep asking questions, so I don't want to hog the time here. I think it would be helpful to get a more in-depth presentation from Lieutenant Cutting on the IA process in general, just for our own understanding, because what you just described to me also, it does kind of beg the question about what policies are getting applied and when those get flagged. For instance, like just as an example, in any investigation, if the officer being investigated is not telling the truth, is being dishonest, that's one of those items that could be flagged really in any investigation and probably should be looked at every time. I mean, it's like some of these policies, it might be good just to have a default, check on them across the board whenever there's a complaint, just to make sure that those items are looked at. And if we wait until the end, that might alter obviously what evidence is being collected, right?
So if you looked at a complaint with a policy as the beginning of it and a policy violation as the beginning of it, while you may have an idea of what that complaint is and what policies would apply, you really kind of have to look at the investigation first. And then the policies get applied once you've understood the investigation to know which policies technically apply. All policies are in play when an investigation is open. There's none that are off limits technically. So you open it up, you do the investigation, and the end of the investigation, then you determine which policies were or were not violated. And we typically document the specific complaint related policies if they were not violated, and then sustain the others.
Lieutenant Cutting, would you, for either January or February, would you prepare a presentation on the IA process with the Sheriff's Office, specifically regarding the investigation process, and also what type of follow-up is done afterwards once recommendations are made, either for discipline or no discipline? Would you be willing to do a presentation on the IA process since you are the supervisor?
Of course.
Okay, that's great. I'll speak with Ms. Griffin about when to schedule that for one of our upcoming meetings. That'd be great. Councilmember Sullivan, was there anything else you wanted to add on that?
I mean, not on that topic, but I did want to point out some positives in the report too, right? I mean, there were some things, obviously the recommendation that was taken to heart or implemented by the Sheriff's Office. I think it's good to call that out. It was called out in the report, but I wanted to call it out in this meeting as well. I also personally was happy to read about the jail phone cost sort of accommodation that was made. I read that article when it came out. I was super offended that it seemed like it was a little bit predatory, and I'm glad that was corrected with the 10 free minutes for everyone across the board. So I just wanted to balance it out a little bit with some positive notes as well. But yeah, that's it. Thanks.
Thank you. And yeah, just my comments as well. It was great to see the Sheriff's Department accepting recommendations that have been made both through our CAC as well as prior CAC makeup. They did accept the firearm recommendation that now it is considered a use of force that must be documented anytime a deputy points a firearm at somebody for compliance. There is also the overarching de-escalation policy that went into effect. That's something I know the CAC has been working on and trying to implement with the sheriff's office for some time. There's some changes I think that still need to be made, but definitely a great start to implementing a overarching de-escalation policy. I agree that this with Council Member Pemberton, this Iolero report really gave a great examples of why Iolero is so needed and why it is important for our for all these lawsuits to be worked out regarding Measure P, so that Measure P can go into effect as it was intended by the voters and move forward. Because clearly we can see that the internal affairs investigations of the Sheriff's Department sometimes, and in the most recent report, quite often are incomplete. And in many cases where the Sheriff's Department either did not recommend discipline or took discipline to one level, the Iolero audits found that additional investigation was necessary, and that with that additional investigation, it was likely that some discipline could be determined. It is absolutely vital for Iolero to have the necessary investigative means to continue the investigation into these incomplete reports and audits. Without the sheriff taking a look at the Iolero recommendations and actually going back and following up on each and every one, which they may or may not do, we need Iolero to have the power that the voters intended Iolero to have, so that when the sheriff refuses to investigate further, Iolero can take the investigations, take the subpoena powers, and complete these incomplete audits and incomplete investigations. And I think that this report shows that to the public very clearly, that Iolero does need those powers that the voters gave us under Measure P. So I'm hoping, and if I can ask Lieutenant Cutting, does the sheriff's office intend to reply to this annual report? And I ask that knowing that it was filed with very little time for a public reply, at least in the November dates. But I'm wondering if the sheriff's office will still take a look at these recommendations and offer some type of reply to the public, even though it may not be filed within the time for the Board of Supervisors.
My answer to the question is we are looking at the report detail by detail. I'm sorry. I don't know what the outcome of the response will be. That'll be a decision that'll be made. I know that the annual report has not been made to the Board of Supervisors yet, and I believe that's pending. I'm not sure on the process currently on that, given the Iolero director position, but I believe that's the pending issue for us.
Thank you. And so the Sheriff's Department will not respond until after it is presented to the Board of Supervisors, correct?
I actually don't know the answer to that. We're still working through the report. There's a lot of cases in there and a lot of very specific things and some fine detail. So
great, thank you. Melanie, do we have information on if the report is still intended to be presented in some manner to the Board of Supervisors and who may be doing that if it's still taking place?
I think our Administrative Services Officer, Jade Kim, is working on the board item.
Okay.
And I just tried to look up the date. I don't have it. I think it's January 11th.
Mhm.
And Jade is not here on the attending list. I'm pretty sure it's January 11th, but
Okay.
we can definitely let people know and let the public know when that will be.
Thank you.
I'm not sure who's going to be presenting it. It might be one of our attorneys.
Mhm.
I'm pretty sure that was being worked on with Carlene before she left, so.
Okay.
Won't be me.
No, I know. Thank you very much. I'm going at this point to open up this item number 2 to our public comment. I definitely want to hear from the members of our public who wish to be heard on this annual report, and I do see hands being raised. Public comments, members are free to address the CAC. Public comment should fall into the category relating to this specific item. We will open up again at the end for general public comment. In addition to any public comment you have, please state your name, and if you represent an organization, please state that as well. And we will limit public comment in this regard to 3 minutes per person, so that we have an opportunity to address any comments and respond if appropriate. I am going to open up now, and I'm just getting my timer out here. I am going to call on well, I see a phone number ending 0694. Phone number ending 0694, if you'd like to step in and give public comment when permitted to do so. Oh.
This is Susan Lamont. It's kind of weird. I just got a message saying that I should unmute and it was next, but I'm not calling from a phone.
That's okay. Susan, let's go ahead. Please, we'll call on you. Please give your public comment when you're ready. Welcome.
Okay, thank you. I just want to make an ask of the CAC. In your role as liaison to the public, I would like to see a vigorous presentation of the findings of this report, the good things and the bad things, to the public, because most people don't know any of this is happening. And some people read the Press Democrat. The Press Democrat covers things better than it used to. Since George Floyd's killing and the protests at that time, they have been much better than they were in the past. They're sort of forced into it. And you can notice from the change in policy related to the phone charges that when this stuff gets publicity, things happen. And if they don't get publicity, nothing happens. So, I don't know how you would do this, what the means would be. A lot of it would be social media. People are still not so much doing things in public yet. But I really would like to see it be an emphasis of the CAC to get findings out to the public. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. The next individual, let's try again. I see 0694 as the hand raised. It's a phone number.
Hi, it's Jim Duffy. Thanks for taking my comments. Starting off, the report started thanking John Berger, acknowledging him at the top of the report. This is not how the public should be learning about who the new staff are in the office. So when you get a new director, I'm asking the CAC to ask that director to update you on staffing changes in the office, and we should get a little background on the folks. I'm requesting that the CAC this evening pass a resolution calling upon the sheriff to issue responses in time for the January hearing before the Board of Supervisors, or we should put off that hearing before the board until such time as the sheriff has written responses ready for that hearing, because it really is meant to be a dialogue. On page 9 of the annual report, it states that what's audited is use of force and in custody deaths, and then it stops there. And other things are also supposed to be audited, including bias, sexual assault and harassment, constitutional violations, deputy dishonesty, and some other things. And so we just need to make sure, get a clarification that what's defined in Measure P as items to be audited is indeed what the office is auditing. On page 10, the Sheriff's Office only partially accepted the CAC's well-researched, evidence-based de-escalation recommendation. The CAC should work to get a written reply from the sheriff's office on the parts of their recommendation that was not accepted, so the CAC and the public can understand the reasons why the sheriff did not accept your full recommendation. And this goes to, and I repeat this often to you guys, that all recommendations, whether from staff or CAC, should be responded to by the sheriff's office in writing, and all of that should go up on your website for transparency purposes. On page 14, the Iolera Community-Oriented Policing Program is targeting justice-impacted communities and with their researchers, and we need to make sure we don't re-traumatize individuals. This work needs to be done with great professionalism and sensitivity, and I'm really worried about members of our community being treated as lab rats by analysts coming from places of great privilege. So I'm requesting that some CAC members look into that and make sure that the people are treated right. On page 18, the cutoff date for the annual report, there's some kind of typo in there. It says it's either November 18th or the 31st, and there's no 31st, so it could be 30th. But anyway, page 18, cutoff date needs to be cleaned up. Also on page 18, it says that audits that were completed during the drafting of the report are not included, but will be summarized and published in future reports from Iolera. Am I getting cut off?
That's the 3 minutes. If you have just briefly you want to finish.
Yeah, I've got a bunch of other stuff. So let me go to the last one because nobody's talked about this yet. Exonerated case number 37 reveals issues with the California Forensic Medical Group. And there have been prior issues flagged in annual reports and the grand jury reports. And so I'm asking the CAC members to consider looking at California Forensic Medical Group, and maybe we should start bringing that medical care in-house. Thanks for giving me extra time. Take care.
Thanks, Mr. Duffy. I do want to let you know, as far as our written replies to the CAC recommendations, the Sheriff's Office has informed us that they are still reviewing our CAC recommendations, but for the firearms one, which has been accepted. The other ones that have been recommended, including the canine and prone position and so forth, we have not received written replies yet, but we are following up and hope that our replies will be given in writing. Thank you very much for that. Also, Mr. Duffy, if you had other points that you were not able to address in the 3 minutes for public comment, please email those to us so that we can circulate those and so that the CAC knows what comments you had regarding other pages and other issues that you found in the report. I know 3 minutes is not necessarily enough to allow you to go over everything. So please send us in whatever you were not able to accomplish verbally and at our meeting today, please. Okay, I will turn now. Oh, yes.
Really quickly, I just wanted to say that the policy review ad hoc had a meeting, and we'll be giving an update when we get to that part of the agenda. And it is regarding those recommendations. So we will have something to provide, and then maybe I can provide something in writing and check with Lieutenant Cutting that I got everything that we discussed at the meeting, and then share that with the public. But when we get there.
Thank you very much. Okay, let's turn now to Jerry Threet. I see Mr. Threet's hand raised on Zoom. Please go ahead and proceed with your public comment when you are able to.
Good evening. I just have a few comments on this year's annual report. And one is I just want to let you know that the county administrator has informed me that the hearing is scheduled for January 25th, and they're still on track for that. First, I think the report includes some very valuable feedback in multiple respects, and I think the director and the staff deserve praise for these parts of the report. It identified some very significant issues that should be addressed by the next sheriff, whoever that person may be. Second, I think the fact that this annual report once again identified multiple types of deficiencies and investigations, which have been noted in every single report since Iolera was founded, shows that the current leadership of the agency needs to get more serious about holding deputies accountable when misconduct occurs. In addition, the ongoing situation shows the folly of pretending that each new director in CAC starts afresh. These things have been going on since the beginning, and it's really essential for effective civilian oversight for ILARO to track these recommendations as we go through time, year after year, and note what has been, where there's been progress and where there has not been progress. And even in some cases, it appears there might be some backsliding. Third, I wanted to mention talk about two of the audits that I think are very important and deserve careful attention. The audit of what's called unfounded case number 8, which appears to involve the hiring of Deputy Muniz Bottomley from Vallejo PD, shows that the sheriff has knowingly hired someone with an extensive history of excessive force allegations who resigned from Vallejo PD before the investigation of those could be completed. There was an extensive public record showing the actions of the deputy before he was hired, yet he was hired anyway. While the audit correctly noted that the deputy could not be disciplined for past behavior at another agency, what it failed to note is that the sheriff's office should not have hired someone with these kind of red flags in their background. So the other audit I'm going to address under a different agenda item. But fourth, I wanted to say that there is no explanation in the annual report of the status of the investigation related to the Black Lives Matter protests. There were quite a number of complaints that were filed around those incidents. I think most of it involved incidents that happened in the jail. And that was contracted out, I believe, over a year ago. So I think the public really deserves to know what the status of this investigation is and when we might expect it to come in. So those are my comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Three. Ms. Griffin, for our next agenda or for our next meeting, either January, preferably January, but if not February, can we try to have an update regarding that independent investigation regarding the jail complaints, if there is an update from that investigator or any new information about that?
I will ask about that.
Okay. Yeah, I know it has been some time, and I know that's being handled independently. So I wanted to follow up on that as well. Thank you. Okay, turning next to ZG. If you are available for public comments, when you are permitted to do so, please state your name if you choose so, and go ahead and give public comment when you're ready.
Everyone, thanks so much. This is Zaira, community organizer here in Petaluma. Following what Jerry Threet had said, I just want to again echo those sentiments that there are multiple audits in the annual report that make it very clear that the recommendations of the 2018 report to improve this department investigation is an issue, and they have failed to resolve this issue. This also means that the Sonoma County Sheriff's investigation remains to be systematically deficient, which has already been pretty clear. There are no real policy recommendation for changes. It's only, policies that are either minor recommendations associated with specific audits. So again, I think community engagement in providing that transparency and something that Susan Lamont had mentioned was a presentation, a vigorous one, is I think very crucial for community input. And just to provide an example also, that ILARO concluded that the jail may have provided deficient medical care prior to sending an inmate to the hospital where unfortunately he died. ILARO concludes that they lack sufficient medical expertise to determine whether the jail medical care was sufficient, and that the Sonoma County Sheriff's Office investigator also lacked that medical expertise. ILARO recommended that the future investigation should include contracted independent medical experts. And lastly, again, there is very little information provided about community engagement efforts by ILARO. That's been provided in the past reports to show where and how ILARO conducted such outreach for community. So a lot of the community members, unfortunately, they're not able to plug in. I have that privilege to be able to do so as I did tonight, or even email, because I am very aware and I know what's going on. It's just, again, very important for the CAC to really do a public outreach in whatever ways that they can. Thanks so much. Have a good night.
Thank you very much. Let me just turn off my timer here. Thank you. Moving to our next public commenter, Barbara Grisecki, excuse me. If you are ready, oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Horstman, Alcina Horstman. Please go ahead and give public comment. You've been accepted into our main room. Please go ahead and with your public comment.
Thank you. I would just like to thank you all for showing up and doing this really important community work on our behalf. And I really don't have much to add, but I just think it's important to speak out if I have an opportunity. And really everything has been said by Susan, Jim, Zaira, Jerry. I agree with everything that they said. So I will give someone else my time. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you very much. I saw a hand up. It's no longer up. Are there any other members of the public? Oh, there she is. Barbara Grisecki, if you would like to give public comment once you're accepted into the room.
Yes, I would. It is with frustration that I read 4 ILARA reports that talk about insufficient investigations. And this is why it's so important that the ILARA has a strong head and that the community can weigh in on that person. And I would just exonerate all of you to, use whatever voices you have with the Board of Supervisors to make that happen. The Sheriff's Office is doing the minimal that they can do. They sit there and they are patting our heads and sending us to bed saying, don't worry. Like in The Grinch That Stole Christmas, the little girl, that's the image I get. If real change was happening, we would see that in the 4 ILARA reports. We do not see that. So it's time for these meetings to be substantive, for the CAC to have the ability to really make positive change for our community, to have those voices being heard, to have the community outreach being done. So I just want to applaud the comments that Jerry, Jim, Alcina, Sierra made. Please listen, folks. We need to do something to change what's going on. We've had the same, if you look at these 4 reports, it's the same thing every year. We need to change this for our community. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, at this time, I'm going to close the public comment relating to the annual report discussion item, agenda number 2. Again, for those who wish to send us comments that you were not able to get in on public comment or chose not to make oral public comments, please email us. We definitely want to see any comments or information that you'd like to provide us on the annual report. Okay, moving on now to item number 3.
Evan?
Oh, yes.
Excuse me, before you do that, is it out of order to adopt Jim's suggestion that we pass a resolution calling on the sheriff to provide a written response before the January 25th meeting?
So if that is something we want to do, we would have to calendar it. I believe for the next agenda item, we did not have any action items for vote on tonight's agenda. And given that we are missing quite a few of our members who are not noticed about a potential resolution, I don't think we can do that tonight. But if we can add the consideration of a resolution for the next meeting in January, and as I understand, that's to consider a resolution to the Sheriff's Department to respond in writing to all recommendations made by the CAC, as well as all audit reports contained in the IOLARO report. So we can take that up for discussion and the possibility of a resolution at the next meeting.
Thank you.
Melanie, will you add that to our next meeting agenda item discussion? Yeah. And thank you, Councilmember Pemberton, for bringing that back to my attention. Okay, we will open up now to agenda item number 3. This is the Community Advisory Council ad hoc reports. I know that each of our ad hoc committees met recently, and I'd like to open those up for discussions on our ad hoc reports, followed by public comment. First, we will open to the bylaw review and revision report. This ad hoc is myself, Lorena Barrera, and Lorez Bailey. And I will turn it over to Councilmember Barrera for the report.
Thank you. So from what I recall, we had a meeting a couple weeks ago and we drafted some changes to the bylaws to make sure they're consistent with the language that is in Measure P, and to make some other changes regarding attendance and things that were missing, and to make it up to date related to our meetings that are currently scheduled. And we will make some other additions at our next meeting, and then have a draft that will be published and available to the public and to the CAC for some final touches before we bring it up for approval at a future meeting.
Great, thank you very much. Yeah, as I recall, we are hopefully, with the bylaws, we're trying to get that done sooner rather than later. We want to provide an opportunity certainly for the public to comment on the proposed changes and for our CAC to review them. And then beyond that, have them for approval. So we do, as the ad hoc for bylaws, intend to do that in the next couple of meetings. Moving on now to our community engagement ad hoc. Who is representing that ad hoc for our reports tonight?
I can go ahead.
Thank you,
But
Councilmember
before we
Esparza.
move on, I did have a question
Sure.
for the policies ad hoc, because I did want to say this comment earlier in the previous, but they kind of tie to each other. The de-escalation recommendation wasn't accepted fully. So there was one that the sheriff's office implemented. And I'm happy that they implemented it, but it's upsetting because during our ad hoc, we had a lot of conversation over the way that we frame policies and how to make sure that you're framing it as in not just focused on the officer and their liability, but also on the human that you are interacting with. So I know, Lorena, you mentioned that we'll probably have an update next meeting on why these recommendations, or I just wanted to get confirmation.
If Chair Zelig, if you like, I could just give the update now.
Okay, sorry, I thought this
so-
was the moment you were gonna give it, so that's why I was.
Yeah, I am.
Okay.
So we had a meeting last Tuesday, I believe, and the council members on that ad hoc are myself, Councilmember Pearl, Councilmember Woods, and Lieutenant Cutting was also there. Am I missing someone? I think it was just us, right? So we all know that the Sheriff's Department uses Lexipol for policy writing, and they, as mentioned previously, they accepted the firearm policy and part of the de-escalation overarching policy recommendation. Lieutenant Cutting did state that procedures are not added to policies because everything's basically on a case-by-case basis. And if they were to add a procedure to a policy and that procedure didn't apply to the incident, then it would just make things more difficult to analyze if there was like a policy violation if you can't apply that procedure to that case or that incident. You mentioned that training plans do have to be set to implement policies, and that's also why a procedure is not adopted in a policy, and he explained that process to us. Regarding pointing of a firearm, which is one of the recommendations that was accepted, that the use of force policy ad hoc committee recommended. He said that deputies are now required to notify supervisors, and then supervisors have to follow a process for reporting when a firearm is pointed at a person. There were a lot of legal changes that the state of California was bringing up, which is why there was a delay in responding to the CAC on some of the recommendations that we made, because it doesn't really make sense for them to make a change and then have to make more changes based on the requirements set by the state of California. So one of the examples that was given was AB 48 regarding crowd control and First Amendment assembly rights and the use of gas projectiles and in crowd control. And whenever the sheriff's department has knowledge of a law that has passed, deputies normally do follow the law, even if the law hasn't been incorporated into the sheriff's policy. And Lieutenant Cunning said the recommendation is not dead in the water, is what I wrote. But that's one of the reasons we haven't received a response from the sheriff's department. And that's basically something that they are working on. And if the community would like, and if Lieutenant Cutting is okay with it, I can send him my notes and we can review what was discussed and then have that sent out. And I think I kind of summarized everything. Did I miss anything? And for what you said about de-escalation, Lieutenant Cunning, I don't know if you want to add to what I said just about why like procedures are not added and maybe what Councilmember Estrada just brought up, because we didn't discuss that, but if you have anything to add, that would be great, please.
Well, I can say on the existing policies that were not specifically addressed in that there were, I believe, 7 bills that were passed that directly affect 3 of the recommendations that were passed on September 30th by the governor. They go into effect January 1st. Today, we received 17 policy updates from Lexipol, which we're comparing to our existing policy, to the recommendations, and we have to come up with a language or adopt a language by January 1st. So the changes were not made based on the initial recommendations yet because we knew the laws were pending and we were waiting for the legal determination on how that applies to policy. On the de-escalation policy, Dora, your point of the human on the other end is well noted. I would agree with you that that was not well emphasized in the existing de-escalation policy, which we did put in place. That policy is not complete. It's been passed and it is in place. Policies can be amended and can be bettered and improved as time goes on. So we can continue to look at that policy. And I hear what you're saying about the human on the other end. And there was not a lot of that in that policy. So we'll have to look at that. I think that answers the question, Lorena.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, and sorry if I got out of order.
No, that's okay. Okay, we've handled the bylaw review and revision. That was the policy recommendation review and update. Thank you, Councilmember Barrera. Who is, excuse me, who is giving our community engagement presentation?
So, so we lost an ad hoc member that was on our ad hoc, so that kind of derailed a little bit of our activity. But Marcy and I have had conversations over the phone, and we have a meeting set for next week to start actually working together and a longer period of time due to the holidays and other family issues that we haven't been able to either meet for longer periods of time or in person. So we'll have an update by next meeting. Marcy, I don't know if you want to add anything, but I did want to say that, listening to public comment, things that did run through my mind is that we have a very diverse CAC. And within our CAC, I think that we do a lot of community engagement, at least I do, within the community I live in. And especially, I've tested my Spanish skills trying to explain ayolero in Spanish. And I know, I ask Adriana all the time, how should I say this in Spanish? So I know that our CAC members care a lot. And I know at different community places where I'm at, I switch my ayolero hat on all the time and explain ayolero and what we do and why we were created. And I feel like that's something really important that also needs to be acknowledged that our CAC does. And I know my fellow CAC members are probably doing the same because they really care about ayolero.
Yeah, thank you, Laura. I am actually in the same position as you. And just having to put on that CAC hat and just explaining what ILRO is. And, I work with families who, currently there are, some of their children who are in the jail currently, and they come to me and they ask me, or they tell me about their situations, and I'm able to direct them and lead them in the right way. So I'm really excited about that and the work that I'm doing here from Windsor to Cloverdale. So I'm really excited to get started. And I see that with Dora too, and just the passion that we have for our community. So I think we're where we need to be.
Great. Thank you so much. Moving on now to the extremism in policing ad hoc report. Who is giving the report out for that group? Councilmember Pearl.
Yeah, so the extremism in policing ad hoc met twice, once in person with Councilmember Solomon, myself, and the director, Carlene Navarro, and once over Zoom with Councilmember Solomon, myself, and Councilmember Pemberton. And we had wide-ranging discussions. There's a lot to do. We're just beginning to dig into this. But there are basically 4 areas we want to look into. One is finding First Amendment experts to talk with us about what actions are possible based upon confirmed extremist or discriminatory language that might have been found on social media done by an employee of the sheriff's office. Finding experts in government law that can also address the same question. Looking into policies of other jurisdictions that cover this territory, and also talking to the sheriff's office about their perspective on this issue. And other questions we might ask or might look at include what investigatory actions can be taken based upon confirmed discriminatory language on social media, and how to approach discriminatory behavior complaints. And we welcome community input to this process. That's our report.
Great. Thank you very much, Councilmember Pearl. Okay, so we've had the ad hoc report outs. I would now open for public comment on these issues, specifically regarding our ad hoc groups, and any public comment that you wish to make in this regard. I do see one hand raised. Oh, a couple hands coming up now. Great. First, I will open up for Jerry 3. If you have comment to make on this issue, this agenda item rather, regarding our ad hoc reports.
Thank you. I want to address the extremism ad hoc, and thank you for setting up the ad hoc. I think it's very important. And then I want to just actually tie this into one of the audits. And the audit of the investigation of anti-Semitic social media posting gives great credence to your decision to set this ad hoc up. The fact that the office, the agency took refuge behind a claim that the First Amendment protects this deputy's actions is a cause for great concern. I will say that in my tenure as director, the sheriff offered similar excuses in response to several recommendations that were made, some of which weren't official written recommendations in the annual report. I recommended that the sheriff's office screen applicants and employees for tattoos that evidenced white supremacist beliefs. The sheriff's response to me was that was not possible because those were free speech expressions by the employees and could not be a basis to refuse an applicant or to discipline an employee in any way. I also recommended that the sheriff audit deputy text and email communications for certain keywords that could evidence white supremacist or other troubling extremist belief structures, and was again told that the First Amendment would prevent that kind of investigatory action by his office. Also, there was an incident where the public information officer of the agency retired just before a local publication was set to publish a news article about that deputy's racist social media post in which she referred to Black and brown men as thugs. And in that case, Sheriff Essick told the publication that the sergeant had a First Amendment right to post whatever he wanted on his private Facebook page. So I want to be really super clear. The case law on the First Amendment teaches us that a deputy's First Amendment rights end where their speech undermines the ability of the agency to provide fair and impartial policing. That's the limit on First Amendment for a police employee. I encourage the CAC ad hoc to look into these issues and partner with those working in this area out in the community, which include CLEAN, the North Bay Organizing Project, and the Commission on Human Rights. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Three. And yeah, it sounds like Councilmember Solomon, it sounds like, or rather, Councilmember Pearl, it sounds like your group is right on track with seeking an expert on First Amendment issues.
Yes, most
It-
definitely.
It seems like that's a great place to start in finding out at what point do those First Amendment rights, at what point can those First Amendment rights be restricted by the Sheriff's Department when the speech is crossing that line? And I think hearing from a First Amendment expert, either just with your ad hoc or for the CAC as a whole in this regard, would be a great idea if you find somebody who wants to come and speak with us about that issue. It's a good one. Okay, turning now to Susan Lamont. Hi, Susan.
Thank you. I
Yes.
just wanted to clarify something because the comment was made that your members are out in the community talking about what IOLERO is and what it does and how to make complaints and that sort of thing. That's not what I was addressing earlier. I was asking for more than that. I was talking about when a report comes out or when you as a body make a recommendation, that you make that known, that you say to the public, here's the recommendation we've made. We have studied this. Here's why we think this needs to change. And then if it doesn't happen, as we've seen in the reports over the years, they sometimes haven't happened, that you then explain to the public, the sheriff said, no, he's not going to do this. And that would get people thinking about these issues and thinking about, well, do I side with CAC and IOLERO? Do I side with the sheriff's office? But it would bring it forward, because your job isn't just to take complaints. That's the director's job. That's not your job. Your job is these other things. And what I'm asking for is more than what has been asked for in the past. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Turning now to Barbara Grasecki. Go ahead and speak when you're able to in the room.
Hello, I just wanted to acknowledge that the Committee for Law Enforcement Accountability Now Clean had sent a request to the Sheriff's Office and the County Administrator and the Board of Supervisors asking that there be a review of their staff for any evidence of white supremacist, racist, anti-Semitic posts, information in line with First Amendment rights, as Jerry Threet outlined. We did not even get an email response back. So I just wanted to state that for the community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, I do not see any other attendees in the public with their hands raised for this agenda item. I'm going to bring it back to our CAC. Any last comments from any council members on our CAC before we move on to the next agenda item? Okay, I see none, then we will go ahead and move on. Opening now agenda item number 4. This is labeled as a discussion of the Sheriff's Office social media use and policies. I will let the public know that the reason this was added to our agenda was because of comments made by the public to our CAC and CAC members who brought this to our attention and requested for it to be calendared. Specifically, but not limited to, we are aware that recently there has been, contained in our IOLERO director's report, at least one incident that resulted in complaints of a deputy making anti-Semitic and racist posts on their personal social media site. The other way in which this was brought to our attention followed a post by Sheriff Essick, specifically regarding, essentially regarding, the question was whether it was a political post involving a member of our community, but we do not necessarily want to focus on the member of our community. Rather, the issue that was brought up was whether Sheriff Essick should be using the public Facebook postings of the community, of the community page, the Sonoma County Sheriff's page, the public government page, for what seemed to be personal or political posts. So that's kind of where we wanted to talk about. Prior to today's hearing, we did send out to our CAC the relevant social media policies for the sheriff's office. First policy is 322, which is regarding the office use of social media. And the other policy is 1030 regarding employee speech, expression, and social networking that speaks more to the personal deputies themselves. So I will open this up generally to our CAC. I know a few of you wanted this on the agenda tonight, so I'll open it so that we can have somebody start our discussions about how you wish to address this. Is there anybody on our CAC who wishes to discuss this topic and discuss the policies that are presently in place with the sheriff? Councilmember Pearl.
I'll start. Okay. Yeah. So I actually was reading. I think there are two in terms of the latter, which is the issue of the sheriff himself using the official page. That was, I think, the thing that sparked me to talk about this. There are a couple of particular policies that are in both about the official page and the employee page, employee use of social media that I thought applied to this. And that was prohibited content being, this is 322.5D, any information that could tend to compromise or damage the mission, function, reputation, or professionalism of the Sonoma County Sheriff's Office. I felt that that post really kind of was at least on the line of that one. And then more particularly the employees, even though this is, I mean, he is an employee, in a way. There's a specific endorse, support, oppose, or contradict any political campaign or initiative. I mean, this was definitely a political post. It was about an upcoming election, and it was supporting a particular candidate. And so that just, anyway, I'll leave it there. That's, for me, that's in violation of the policies pretty directly, from my perspective.
Are there either Councilmember Pearl or other council members, does anybody here feel that these policies need to be either amended or strengthened in some way to more specifically address those issues? Or do you feel that the policies in place are such that it's pretty clear and we want to make some recommendations to the sheriff on these policies? I agree with Councilmember Pearl. Again, taking the content itself out of it regarding the specific person, anytime our sheriff is posting about another potential candidate for sheriff, and specifically regarding that candidate's qualifications, that candidate's views, that candidate's politics, I think it definitely crosses the line into no longer being an appropriate use of the office's social media policy. Specifically, it says that the Sonoma County Sheriff's Office may use social media to effectively inform the public about office services, issues, investigations, and other relevant events. The posting at issue here was a post that was done weeks after the issue was brought to the sheriff's attention, specifically regarding an issue that was only an issue to the sheriff or the candidate themselves. So I would ask for our CAC, what do you think we can or should do in a case where the sheriff himself is essentially posting on the government page about public matters involving an upcoming election, which it appears the posting was regarding? Councilmember Sullivan, I see you've.
I think Nancy was going to talk. Nancy, you go first.
I guess I wanted to add one little additional piece of information, and this occurred before I became a member of CAC. So this is not, this is something that happened before my appointment. In response to when I read about the sheriff's post, I emailed the sheriff and saying, one, that I thought that it was an improper political statement, and two, I thought it was abusive. I think that it actually violates the abusive content clause in the policy as well. And I did not get a response. I got a response back from Sergeant Valencia, and he did not respond to the second issue, but he asserted that they were just standing up for a fellow employee. And I followed that up with asking when had they ever posted something on the official page, responding to public comments about a particular deputy, and got no response as well. So I think that it's clear that this is an issue that they are not addressing. That is not being addressed by the Sheriff's Department. I think that we should be I don't know who controls the social media of the government. I don't know whether the county has an overarching social media policy in addition to the sheriff's, but I think we should look into that. And if so, we should report that as a violation to county council.
Thank you. I'm looking now at the office use of social media, and it does appear to be very clear that it should not be used regarding any promoting or any government use of promoting a candidate or a government office. The other thing I note in the employee speech is very clear that speech or expression made that tends to compromise or damage the mission, function, reputation, and professionalism of the sheriffs. I don't know if a formal IOLERO complaint has been made regarding Sheriff Essex post, but certainly the one that was made regarding the deputy's post that was considered in our IOLERO report. I really hope that the Sheriff's Department takes another look at this and goes back and reviews its policy as it relates to this specific sustained report. They determined that the deputy violated policy for posting content that had strong racial undertones, but noted that he may not have intended it as racist comment. For them to sustain a violation for something that they then got on social media and complained about regarding a private citizen is highly offensive. The violation that was sustained against the deputy, they noted it may not have been intended as a racist content. And I noticed on the social media postings of the sheriff's office, this deputy's strongly racial undertoned post was not addressed by the sheriff. Yet when a member of our community posted something that had strong racial undertones, it resulted in our sheriff making a public post in support of a candidate for public office, as well as pointing out the faults of our private citizens posting. So I find that the hypocrisy and the double standard here is just overwhelming. And I'm hoping that our liaison will bring these comments back to the sheriff so that they can review the appropriateness of future postings of that type, and hopefully refrain from blatantly political posts supporting a candidate for public office in an election that's less than 1 year away. If there are other public comment or other comments from our CAC, I want to accept them and listen to them before we open this up to the public, which I know wants to be heard on this as well.
Yeah, I've got a comment.
Yeah.
I think let's put aside, I know it's easy to go down this path of looking at the policies. I think this one is without argument a violation of the stated policy. Okay, so let's put that aside for a second. The question to me is, okay, now what? Right. So I think maybe like an official complaint should be put forth, maybe a report to the supervisors. I don't know what the right mechanism is for like getting this feedback out there, but I think it was clearly improper. And the question to me that we should be talking about is, what do we do in this scenario, in this situation? You know, where the sheriff has acted improperly, what do we do?
That's a great question, Councilmember Sullivan. What do we do about a sheriff who has seemingly violated the policy in an election year by posting publicly in support of a candidate for office when that sheriff is out of office and has stated he's not running for re-election? You know, certainly I think an IOLERO complaint and a sheriff's complaint to internal affairs is necessary. Where it goes, I'm not, I don't know. I don't feel very confident that it goes somewhere to have an effect, unfortunately, but you're right. What can we do and what should be done in a situation where the sheriff who's on his way out is violating policy to support who he wants to be coming in? And again, our comments here, I want to be very clear. Our comments here are not for or against any of these candidates who may be running for sheriff. And I want to make that very clear. But what's also made clear is that the sheriff clearly supports a candidate and is using the office's official Facebook page to voice that support. Does anybody have suggestions on what can be done in that situation? Councilmember Pearl.
I'm wondering, is there a Sonoma County overarching social media policy? And if there, and who's in charge of that? And if there is, can we appeal to that agent, whoever that is, to say this is a violation of their, you know, probably, I'm sure it's a violation of the Sonoma County policies. If it's a violation of the sheriff's office policies itself, and just say this is a violation of policy, what can, I mean, find out what we can do about it from that point. That's my question.
Melanie, is it possible to find out for either our next meeting or the one after from county council? Can we inquire as to the county's overarching social media policy, if there is one, and what enforcement methods there are if somebody is in violation?
There is one. I don't know how structured it really is. Sylvia Lemus is one of our attendees tonight. She might be able to address that from the county communications office better than I can. We'll certainly ask her if she wants to raise her hand and answer that question.
I see Miss Lemus's hand up. If she may provide some insight into this, why don't we hear from Sylvia Lemus?
Hi, yes, thank you. This is Sylvia Lemus. So I am here on behalf of communications for the county, and I am not sure, this would be an ISD information systems policy. So this is something definitely that we can take back, Melanie, to the team and find out what our policy is. I'm not sure if it's overarching, but the county does have certain standards that they have. So it may be something that we may need to check with ISD and county council on. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll follow up with Melanie.
Councilmember
Sylvia.
Sullivan?
Oh, I think someone raised their hand before me. Lorena, was that you? or-
Councilmember Barrera, are you raising your hand? Yep.
I wanted to just say elected officials have the ethics committee. There's violations that we hear from like members of Congress all the time, and I'm not sure what the actual process is, and if we have one for the sheriff, because he is an elected official, and maybe there was just disregard for a very clear policy that has a whole section on unauthorized endorsements and advertisements. And it has a lot of detail. I mean, I think the policy is pretty clear. So it's obvious that there was a violation of that policy, but then as a CAC, I don't know if we do have to have like a formal complaint or something that is written and maybe made public so that the community is aware. And if, let's say, for example, the sheriff were running for re-election, then the community would be made aware of these types of violations. And well, obviously, if he were running for re-election, he wouldn't be endorsing somebody else. But my point is that the community should be made aware of such violations of employee speech, expression, social networking, and especially social media, since it's such a big thing here. And as public servants, we should be representing the community overall and not using platforms like this for personal benefit. So I don't think that there's any, I mean, I personally think that the policies are clear, and I actually wanted to ask Lieutenant Cutting if there are any policies that the sheriff has where there's like a specific disciplinary recommendation. And I don't know if that would apply to the sheriff who's basically running the whole department, but are there policies where there is a section where there's like I know you said there, we don't put processes in policies, but what would be like the disciplinary action if it weren't the sheriff and something like this were done? And could that, if there isn't a disciplinary recommendation for violations like this, is that something that we should consider recommending and reviewing?
Is that my question?
I think so.
Okay, I don't really know how to answer this question other than to say that discipline comes from the sheriff. And internal investigations are conducted by the Internal Affairs Division on behalf of the sheriff as the sheriff. It is technically his investigation. And so all that would come from him. There is no policy that outlines disciplinary procedures other than the overall process. But as far as what disciplinary process happens for what type of violation, no, there is no policy that states that because it's a subjective approach.
Lieutenant Cutting, who is the person who refers internal affairs investigations if the subject is the sheriff himself? For example, if the sheriff is to be investigated by internal affairs, how would that begin?
Well, I don't believe there is such a thing from an internal affairs because it is the sheriff's investigation. So the sheriff's not going to investigate himself.
Right.
Internally, I don't believe there is a mechanism. Externally, there are mechanisms. You'd have to have a law violation. A policy violation is sort of hard to explain because policy is the sheriff's policy. He can change policy at a verbal. He can have a verbal change in policy. And I'm not saying that any of that took place in this case, but I'm saying that it would be really hard for internally for there to be an investigation into the sheriff when he is the policy himself.
That's a huge problem, right? I mean,
Yeah, so I mean, I think we're all hearing the huge problem here is that essentially the sheriff can post whatever he wants to Facebook and nobody can investigate that internally because he would be the one beginning the investigations, essentially.
Yeah, I wouldn't say nobody, but I would say that you would have to have a law violation or a yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's other aspects of stuff that get looked at by other agencies other than the sheriff's office, but internally, no.
So who would then, Lieutenant Cutting, be the person who could then initiate an investigation internally against the sheriff? Anybody, or do they all have to come from outside for a policy violation that is apparently to the CAC, a pretty blatant voluntarily violation of the sheriff's policy? How can we then, or anybody, have that investigated if the sheriff is the one doing the investigation?
So I think what you have to look at is if the CAC believes firmly that there was a policy violation, then you have an avenue, a public avenue to voice that. I think that's your avenue.
And okay, thank you. And just for our CAC members, and it appears when Measure P is actually in effect, IOLERO may have the investigative powers to do those outside investigations, which we currently may not have now with Measure P under review, given recent lawsuits. Councilmember,
Kevin?
yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out one thing. I mean, and Lieutenant Cutting kind of like skirted around this a little bit, but really we do need, there's two threads here, right? There's a policy violation potential thread for the sheriff, and then there's like a violation of law, right? Like say a criminal act occurred. it does seem like we need to create processes for, or at least suggest processes for both. Whereby, you know, essentially like in a normal situation, right? You might see like a recusal of a DA's office if they were somehow involved in some investigation, and the case would be referred to some other organization for their independent review. So I think there's a lot of I mean, I have a lot of questions about this, but I just wanted to point that out, that there's two threads in my view on this.
Evan,
Councilmember Barrera.
Just related to that kind of, and people with a legal background, Evan, and attorneys. So on the employee speech, expression, and social networking policy, under section 1030.4.1, unauthorized endorsements and advertisement, it cites government codes 3206, 3302, and then 5 USC, is that US Supreme Court, I assume?
United States Code. That's
Yep,
like the
there you
penal
go.
co- yeah,
United
penal
States
is United
Code.
States Code, yeah.
1502. So does that mean that that was taken from a law that was passed? And if that's in that unauthorized endorsements and advertisements section, does that then constitute a violation of a law that's included in a sheriff's policy? That's my question.
It could. We'd have to look at the laws.
Yeah, I haven't looked at
those code
specifically.
sections.
Yeah, I haven't specifically looked at those government codes to know if it would be like a law violation in that regard. I'd want to look more closely at that, actually. That's a very good point. If there are policies based on laws, the violation of that policy may also be a violation of the underlying law, which I think we also need to look into. Yeah. So I am going to open this up now to public comment so we can hear. Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Griffin.
I did find the policy on the ISD page.
Okay.
For policy for official use of social media sites. I still think there's some sufficiently vague language in there. But it's at the sonomacounty.ca.gov/CAO/administrative policies. It says 901 official use of social media policy. I'm not sure when this, it says it was approved in 2011. I don't see anywhere where there's been an update to it. I can send the link to to the CAC. They want to look at it. And anybody else who wants to email ILRO, and, you know, they can find it on their own, or I can send it to them.
Okay,
I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank
If
you.
you could send that, that would be great. Thank you. I'd like to open up now. I do see we have some members of our public who wish to give public comments in this regard. I'm going to open up and ask Carl Tenenbaum for, again, this is public comment regarding the item number 4, the discussion of the sheriff's social media use and policies. Mr. Tenenbaum, please go ahead and speak whenever you're accepted.
Hi, thank you for indulging me. I just want to make sure I'm understanding the Lieutenant Cutting. So you're saying that the Sheriff Essick is the final arbiter of any policy violation complaint, and that also he's, how did you put it? He wouldn't be subject to, basically there's no consequence for him. Like it appears from the CAC's findings that there's a clear violation of the social media policy regarding what occurred on the social media site under the signature of Sheriff Essick. So just so you're saying there's no consequence for a violation of policy. So it's sort of akin to executive privilege, I guess, is my takeaway. Is that what you're saying, Lieutenant?
2 points. Number one is you said that the findings of the CAC, I don't believe the CAC has conducted a thorough investigation. I think it's a reference to the review of the postings and a determination based on that. A thorough investigation has a lot more points to it. Secondly, the sheriff is the disciplinary action of the sheriff's office. He is the one who determines discipline for the department. He is the only one who makes that determination. And that was my statement.
Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to misstate with the CAC. Just the discussion today is that it appears to be that there's some spirited discussion about what occurred on social media. And you're saying that ultimately, unless it's I believe, and again, I don't want to misstate what you said, a violation of the law is obviously a separate thing that would go to the district attorney's office. But for purposes of policy within the sheriff's organization, Sheriff Mark Essick is the final arbiter. And if he chooses, and especially if it were him, if he chooses not to, like even some of the cases that we've seen today that we've reviewed, hate speech being one of them, to come to that somewhat disingenuous decision that it wasn't the intent of the individual who posted the hate speech. So Sheriff Essick, if he were the subject of a policy violation, he's the one that gets to decide what the penalty for Sheriff Essick is. Is that correct?
Again, it goes to a policy issue. He is the disciplinary action from the sheriff's office. I don't know how else.
So the answer is yes. Right. So the answer is yes. He's the one that gets to decide. Okay. Thank you. I have no more.
Thank you, Mr. Tenenbaum. Kathleen Finnegan, please give your public comment. And I will begin the timer for 3 minutes. When you begin, please go ahead and speak when you're accepted. Hi, Kathleen.
Yeah, thank you. It's good to be here this evening. I'm very troubled that this is what the sheriff's office has come to. But we have precedent here with this sheriff, and I'm sorry to say, because personally I'm a little bit fond of him, but this is not a personal issue for me. This has to do with official stuff, and there is. I mean, he's already established himself as a rogue sheriff. He refuses to follow the directions of the public health officer, and other stuff that he just has made his own decisions on, regardless of what the law is. And so, in this case, there is no question that he posted a personal political piece on the official Facebook page. It does not belong there. It is against the policy that's already established. Obviously, the complaint going to internal investigation or internal affairs is a waste of time. That's just a non-starter. I suggest that this body tonight passes a resolution that will be published and sent out, declaring that you have found that there is a violation of the stated policy and possibly of federal laws, and that you are requesting that the county council, the district attorney, and the board of supervisors take up this issue immediately for appropriate action. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen. I will note that if we do add a resolution, it has to be on a future agendized item. We do not have that on our agenda today for purposes of notice to our other CAC members or for a vote on that issue. Thank you, Kathleen. Calling ZG. ZG, please go ahead and give your public comment on this issue once accepted.
Hey, everyone. Thanks so much. So yeah, again, my name is Ira, community organizer here in Petaluma. I just want to, in support of the two statements that were also put out by the Commission on Human Rights and Sonoma County's NAACP, the appropriation of racism, which declared that instead of addressing racism in the departure of Black county leaders, the Sonoma County Sheriff's Office is more concerned with by targeting former community leader, Mr. Threet, who is also the former director of Iolero. And it is very clear that it is a violation. So I'm hoping that you all at your next meeting make some sort of a motion, and appreciate you all upholding what's already written. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Turning now to Katrine Siafa. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing that. Katrine Siafa?
No, you did great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I actually want to echo exactly what Zaira just said. Definitely it sounds like this needs to be investigated as a code and policy violation, but I was mainly calling to also uplift the press release and the statement made by the NAACP of Sonoma County entitled The Appropriation of Racism, that was released on November 14th. And that really detailed how appalling, cynical, and offensive it was for the sheriff to throw around an accusation of racism to use for his own political purposes, while consistently ignoring the mistreatment of Black and brown people by the sheriff's office in this community previously. So that's all. I yield my time. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Moving on, Michael Titone. Or Titone?
Everyone, just want to echo what some of the last speakers have said. I think it's super concerning to see, well, it's not concerning. It's actually pretty predictable to see this level of hypocrisy from government officials. We see it all the time. So I think that, what would be great would be seeing the CAC actually take steps to help hold him accountable and set a precedent for future to make this process a little bit easier next time this sort of thing happens. And I would love to see there to actually be consequences for a violation of policy and not just acknowledging it. But if it comes to, just making it extremely public that Mark Essick violated his own policies and is hypocritically not going to enforce them, that's also something. So, I'd love to see, even stronger levels of oversight for the sheriff's office. And in this particular case, I would love to see there actually be some consequences. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Turning now to Susan Lamont.
Thank you. I want to remind people of the history of the sheriff's office, at least since Andy Lopez was killed. Every sheriff has declared no one has the right to tell them what to do about anything, that there is no power to oversee the sheriff. That is their firmly held belief, and that the only remedy is to vote them out of office, which then allows them to be completely rogue if they're not going to run again, as is the case with Mark Essick. So this is essentially what we're up against and what we've been hearing for a long time. I'm very glad to hear how strong a stance the CAC appears to be taking on this subject, and I do hope you take it up for a real resolution at your next meeting, and that, as others said, make it as public as possible and explain exactly what it is that's going wrong at the sheriff's office and their lack of accountability. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Keith Reinhardt, welcome, Keith. If you could please give your public comments when admitted.
Thank you, Mr. Zelig. I want to first, I want to thank you for allowing me to speak, and I want to acknowledge your hard work, Ms. Griffins, Ms. Barreras, and the rest of the committee, and of course, Lieutenant Cuddy. My main thing is, with so many things going on right now that I'm hearing tonight, I would like to see CAC meet every 2 weeks. I think there's so much going on that you should consider that. Secondly, I don't expect that you would receive any kind of help from our current district attorney if you did try to bring charges, as Lieutenant Cutting suggested, against Sheriff Essick. I don't see that happening, so I would like to see, perhaps, at least if you attempt that and are rebuffed, that perhaps you can take that up at the state level with the state attorney general. And lastly, it sounds to me like Iolero, in the absence of former Director Navarro, you guys are doing some great work, and I appreciate it. And like Ms. Lamont said, I hope that you can keep going farther down this road to obtain the results that ILARO was intended to in the beginning when it was created and led by Mr. Threed. Thank you.
Thank you. Lieutenant Cutting, I see your hand up to address something.
Yeah, I just wanted to be clear. I didn't recommend that charges be brought up on anybody. In fact, I have a whole opinion about that. What I said was outside of a criminal charge, I am not aware of what body you would take this to. That was my only point.
Thank you. Bailey, if you could please speak when admitted to the room here. Bailey?
Hi, this is actually Lee, but thank you very much. And thank you to the CAC, all of you for your, for this whole thing. I echo what everyone else has been saying, and especially the last caller, although I understand that Mr. Cutting didn't suggested it might be a good idea to look into legal action with the state attorney general. This seems like a policy violation that can't be helped. It sounds like there's nothing to do. I hope that you will do a thorough investigation, because it seems to me that if a very unthorough investigation is revealing what this is already revealing, and we have the NAACP having statements and we have public outcry, and we find out that there's nothing to be done because the person who's in trouble is the person in charge. You can't ground the dad, I guess. So I encourage you to do that thorough investigation, and please include, the public and make sure the public knows what happened and, why it was allowed to happen, especially since there's no way to if someone violates a policy, but they're allowed to violate a policy, then I think the public needs to know that there's no policies. So anyway, it's confusing, I think, and I appreciate your time. And I think the public needs to know what's happening here. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. Barbara Grasecki.
Yeah, I would just like to draw a through line through tonight, which is the 4 years of ILARO reports with repeated violations without any corrective action. So we see the same issues over and over. The Clean Committee reaches out to talk about what kind of review they're going to do on the potential for white supremacy, racism in the department. No response. The efforts of Nancy Pemberton reaching out on the same issue, again, getting no response. And now, what do we have? We have a sheriff in violation of a policy with no accountability. This is the through line. And this is why I just want to thank everyone on the CAC. You guys, you're the firewall. You are what we are relying on to improve law enforcement in our county. And I just want to thank you for your service. I also just want to, it's so hard to see these meetings go on and on without accountability for the sheriff. An independent investigation into his social media post, a referral to the district attorney, to the attorney general, because the DA probably won't do anything. Something needs to happen. The sheriff cannot be above the law. And this is what I'm hearing. He's the rule maker. And if he breaks the rule, there's no accountability. And how can that be? Because any of us on this call, if we broke the law, we'd be in jail. I'm sorry, and I know this is a policy and it's not a law, but he's the sheriff. There needs to be accountability, discipline, something. And if it can't be done within Sonoma County, it has to be done at the state level. And I just would exhort you to do that. And again, I just want to thank everyone on the CSE because I know this is a lot of time and energy, and I just appreciate all you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Barbara. And it looks like our last public speaker on this agenda item number 4 is Josh Simmons. Josh?
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening.
I'd like to thank the CAC for agendizing this. This whole incident is an astonishingly self-serving use of public resources to attack a private individual and tip the scales of an election. In this discussion, a small, unsurprising detail, and yet still so astonishing, the admission that the sheriff can do no wrong because forget policy, the sheriff is policy. Cast against previous rogue actions and a spat of elected officials across the country, sheriffs in particular acting like they're little kings, this is gravely concerning. I would like to uplift the statements in particular of the NAACP and the Sonoma County Commission on Human Rights. And I would strongly encourage that recourse be sought both legally at the highest levels possible, because clearly Sonoma County struggles with accountability across the board. Administratively, because clearly some policies are violated. And even symbolic recourse, because we can't let this go. And even if we struggle with administrative and legal recourse, let's at least make some noise about this. This gets to the very integrity of self-governance. Please, I hope everyone follows this lead all the way. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for your comments. It looks like we have one last public comment hand up. I believe that's Jim Duffy, phone number 0694.
Hi, thanks. It is Jim Duffy. I'll be real quick. Thank you all for a really substantive discussion on this agenda item. I want to support the calls for you guys to have it as an action item at your next meeting and to pass some resolutions calling for a criminal prosecution as well as to publicize the resolution that you do wind up passing. And at a minimum, it should be a censure of the sheriff. And in notice of the blackout that is occurring on this issue within the Press Democrat, who did the front page article with the word racist and Director Threet's name in it, and then has not said a damn word when they've been called out by the NAACP and the Human Rights Commission, and other people have been writing letters and they're doing nothing. You're going to need to invite KQED in Northern California Public Media and KTVU and some outlets with integrity, because there's a blackout because the Press Democrat is in on this. So for your next meeting, I encourage you to do some outreach to get some real media there. Thank you so much for taking my comments.
Thanks, Mr. Duffy. Okay, I am going to close this agenda item for public comment and bring it back to our CAC. If there's anybody else, including Lieutenant Cutting, if anybody has any additional comments on this specific issue. Okay, and it looks like there's no additional comments, so I will close this agenda item. I appreciate those bringing it to our attention so we could have this on the agenda. Councilmember Pemberton, I see it.
I'm sorry, I just want to find out how we go ahead about putting things on for an action item. Does somebody here, do one of us need to draft something?
No,
how does that work?
We can make a request for Ms. Griffin to add for our next agenda planning meeting that members of our public and CAC would like the possible agenda item regarding a discussion regarding the resolution for the sheriff, or resolution of censure of the sheriff regarding social media posts in violation of policy. I don't think we're at the point where we're recommending charges of violations of law that we can see, but certainly I think we are dealing with a violation of the sheriff's policy and the county policy. And so we can ask for that item to be on the next agenda for discussion at that time. And yeah, Councilmember Pearl.
Another question in terms of let's take a deeper investigation of this issue. Is that in our purview or in IOLARO's purview? Do IOLARO have to do the investigation of that?
Well, oh, sorry. Right now, you know, IOLARO, as far as the taking up of investigations, I believe a lot of what IOLARO can and cannot do regarding its own investigations, subpoena powers and other things is on hold while lawsuits are worked out such that Measure P can once again be effective. The unions have effectively gutted Measure P's effectiveness until further decisions by the courts. And we desperately need those decisions soon so that IOLARO has the powers that Measure P intended for it to have. Also, we need a new director, and I hope that our Board of Supervisors begins that process sooner rather than later for a nationwide, publicly transparent search for a new IOLARO director, such that once we do get our investigative and subpoena powers back for IOLARO, we have a director who's going to use them and move forward with them.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Okay, I'm going to now move on to item number 5 on our agenda. This is for general public comment, not on items appearing on the agenda, but within the subject matter of the CAC. If there's any members of our public who have not yet been heard or who wish to be heard on any matter that we have not yet discussed within our subject matter, please go ahead and raise your hands and we will see who's there. Okay, let's start with Mr. Reinhardt. Keith Reinhardt.
Thank you again. I want to appreciate the chairman of the CAC, particularly also Ms. Griffin and Ms. Barrera for their participation, and Lieutenant Cutting. The only thing I have to say is I hope the part of Measure P that you're going to be funded 1% of the sheriff's budget is still in place. And with that in mind, I encourage you to hire more investigators, meet more frequently, and let's try to continue the progress that I can hear at this meeting of the CAC, trying to improve the lives of the residents of Sonoma County and trying to bridge the gap between law enforcement, or particularly the sheriff's office law enforcement, and the residents of Sonoma County. That's all. Thank you. Great meeting.
Thank you. Mr. Threet, Jerry Threet.
Thank you. I just wanted to say, I haven't been to one of your meetings for a while, and I just wanted to say, I think that the group that you have together is very impressive, and I commend you for the very substantive discussions you've had on every item. I don't mean any aspersions on previous iterations of the CAC, but I just was very impressed tonight. And I have 2 suggestions for the CAC for the future, and one is that I think it's a very worthwhile and valuable project to come up with recommendations for IOLARO to actually have a work plan, which you have a director in place. So an annual work plan that would set out, what's going to be done during that year, what the goals are, and obviously in collaboration with the sheriff's office on what those topics should be. And then secondly, you all have just reviewed the annual report. I think this is a good time to look at what you might want in the next annual report, what you might want prioritized. So those are just my comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And it does not look like there is any additional public comments on tonight. So I will go ahead and close that last public comment. Before we go and before I adjourn tonight's meeting, I just wanted to give a brief update. My understanding is that the audits that were being done by the director, there are still attorneys at IOLARO who are continuing the work of IOLARO and continuing the backlog of audits. That work has not stopped. It is continuing. Additionally, there are interviews continuing to take place regarding excuse me, permanent attorney positions. Those interviews, some have already taken place, more are ongoing. So again, to our public, I want you to know that the work of IOLARO is not stopping because we do not have a director. the work of Iolero is continuing with the amazing Iolero staff and our attorneys. Thank you, Ms. Griffin, for stepping up and doing a lot right now that in the place of the director when she's not here, and until we get a new interim director and a full director. And with that, our next meeting is going to be January 3rd, 2022. And I will adjourn tonight's meeting and thank all of you for participating. Thank you to all our CAC members, Lieutenant Cutting, Ms. Griffin, and our public for joining us. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night. See you next month.